Another week of women's basketball here in the Big Sky Conference. We're here with Portland State women's basketball coach Lynn Kennedy. Coach, another tough loss at home against Sacramento State. What did you see out of your team this weekend that will help you moving in towards another tough weekend at home?
Well, I think as you go through the conference season, you're always going to face tough opponents, especially in conference play. But, being at home, we need to start protecting our home court, playing better. We talked a lot about, through the weekend and then, early this week in practice, just picking up our defensive intensity. With a young team, you're going to go through the ups and downs of a season. And we're kind of on that downward trek right now, but we've got to kind of change that. And we can do that with our defensive intensity, our defensive strategy, how we're executing that, and then really in the games we've got to make sure that we do that for 40 minutes. We haven't been able to do that most of the games. The last couple of weeks we've been playing one or two good quarters, and then we have one or two off quarters. So we've got to make sure that we get a complete game, especially going against two of the better teams in the league in Eastern and Idaho. We've got to be able to pick that up on the defensive end for this weekend.
One of the things that sets Sacramento State apart from the rest of the conference is their ability to keep fresh legs on the court. They have 14 people who can play, and they play all 14, regularly line changing, all five within 45 seconds to a minute. Talk a little bit about how that impacts playing a team like that and not having necessarily the bench depth that they might have.
It's a unique style, and I think that they do keep fresh bodies on the court, and the way they play, they have to, pressuring up the entire game. I felt like we were in shape. We didn't wear down. We just made some, key mistakes as far as the full court, our offensive set, and what we were trying to do on the break. We missed a lot of easy shots. So I think for us, and then on the defensive end, we didn't follow the game plan for the 40 minutes. So I think, looking at all that, it does play into it. Just a different style. But I think once you get that intensity on defense, you follow the game plan, you execute. The offensive side, it kind of takes care of itself because you do get a lot of easy looks because they're giving up some in the full court. But it's something that we got to continue to learn as a young team.
Talked about at the beginning of the season how we would probably have one of the most impressive looking benches in the conference with our three redshirts that we have this year. Talk a little bit about this year and how you use a redshirt year to help develop those three players.
Yeah, and our bench has kind of grown with injuries too, so we do have a very impressive bench. But with our three redshirts, it's a growing process for them. It's hard to redshirt, it's hard to sit out a year, but it's also a growing time for them to get better. Each and every practice, they've got to raise their level. It helps us too to play against high-level competition every day in practice. And we just talked about every day, keep getting better, and they can keep pushing our starters. Our starters can push them, so it allows us to kind of mix those teams, get some high-level play in our practices, and kind of get them ready for next year.
Tough Big Sky Conference schedule continues this weekend as we host conference-leading Eastern Washington here at the Stott Center on Thursday night. Coach, what do you see out of Eastern that has set them apart and allowed them to go undefeated so far this year?
Well, I think they played a tough preseason schedule. I think that they, went on the road. They were with some teams that were ranked. They've got some good quality wins in the preseason. I think that allowed them to have that confidence going into the conference season, and they've continued that throughout the conference play. They play extremely aggressive on defense. It's a team defensive set that they run. They pressure up. They get a lot of action on the ball. But they've got some bigs that can be there on the backside that can help, and they rotate. You can tell that that's one of their main things that they talk about as a team is on the defensive end. Offensively, they got three of the best offensive players in the league, and at any time they can shoot threes, they can drive, they can attack. So they're a handful for any team. When you start looking at our defensive strategy going into the game, it's going to be hard to even contain them. Because they're just such good players, and they run their system, they run their sets, and they're not a very deep team, but at the same time, even their players that would be so-called role players, they fit their roles. They play extremely hard, and they've been a tough team to stop the last couple of weeks, especially at home. But even on the road, they pick up their intensity, and you can tell they're getting stops, and that kind of gives them some confidence going to the offensive end.
The Eagles come to the Stat Center Thursday night at 7 o'clock. On Saturday, the Vikings will host the Idaho Vandals at 2 o'clock. Coach, what have you seen out of the Vandals this year?
Well, with them too, they've played an impressive preseason schedule, almost upsetting Duke. And they're a great shooting team. I mean, that's probably their biggest difference from last year is they're making shots this year. They kind of rely on the three ball a little bit, but it's a little bit different than maybe a Sac State team where they can attack. It's oriented around their three-point shot, and if they're hitting threes, they're a tough team to stop because they can score. I think that picks up their defensive intensity. They're another team that runs their system. They run their sets extremely well, and again, it's kind of based on how they're playing defensively and if they're hitting their three shot, and they did that against Montana, upsetting Montana at home, and then just came up a little bit short against Montana State. But they're a dangerous team, and I think they're one of the top teams in the conference as well.
Couple of challenges for the Vikings here at the Stat Center this week. For more information and to follow the action live online, visit govikes.com.